The blue room in the basement of the Geospatial Data Processing Center in Helsinki didn't get its name from the color of the walls, but from the cold, ghostly light emanating from the 12 ultra-resolution monitors arranged in a semicircle. The environment was kept at a constant 18 degrees Celsius to protect the rendering servers, but in the early morning of November 8, 2022, Dr. Elena Corves felt a chill that the climate control could not explain. It was 02:14 a.m. The silence was absolute, as the acoustic insulation blocked out the outside world, leaving Elena alone with the digital eyes orbiting the Earth at 27,000 kilometers per hour. Elena, a veteran of topographic analysis who trusted heat maps more than people, was paralyzed. Her right hand hovered over the mechanical keyboard, trembling, unable to type the abort command. Before her, on the central 32-inch monitor, the global surveillance system displayed 2 geographic points blinking in unison with a blood-red outline, the E. Visual code for critical thermal synchrony event. On one side of the screen, the dry, dusty bed of the Euphrates River in Iraq. On the other, a virgin ice plain in Queen Maud Land, Antarctica. The physical distance between them was irrelevant. The temporal connection was absolute. The system wasn't showing 2 isolated events. It was showing a mechanism of cause and effect. Elena looked at the system clock. The anomaly began at the exact millisecond the river level hit the historic 0 mark. She knew with the cold certainty of numbers that she wasn't witnessing a natural phenomenon. She was watching a lock being opened in the Middle East and a door unlocking at the South Pole. To understand the gravity of what was on the screen, one must understand the mind of Elena Corves. At 61, she was a living legend in the remote sensing community, LiDAR and thermography. Her brain functioned in coordinate grids and color spectra. She didn't see landscapes, she saw data. Hired as a senior consultant for a European Union agricultural consortium, her mission that month was technical and depressing: to monitor the water collapse of the Tigris and Euphrates basin to predict the failure of future harvests. It was the work of a geological obituary. The routine was hypnotic, downloading data packages from the Sentinel-2 satellite, applying ground-penetrating filters, and cataloging new areas of land exposed by the receding water. Everything changed when the satellite swept over. Sector 4, an isolated bend in the river that, according to historical records, hadn't seen sunlight for 4,000 years. The LiDAR, configured to ignore sand and silt, returned a solid echo. There was something buried there. These weren't mud-brick ruins of Babylon that crumble with time. The thermal image revealed a perfect rectangular structure, 20 by 30 meters, emitting an unnatural cold in contrast to the hot desert. The surface temperature of the object was a constant, 40 degrees C. As Eleanor adjusted the filter for gas analysis, the screen lit up. The fissure in the riverbed wasn't just exposed, it was exhaling. A plume invisible to the naked eye, but glowing in the infrared spectrum, was rising from the structure. The chemical signature was unmistakable: xenon-135, an isotope that does not exist in nature, produced only by nuclear fission or by stasis preservation technologies. Elena's routine shattered right there. The river hadn't just dried up, it had uncovered something that was deliberately submerged to be kept cold. Elena's first reaction was to look for a sensor fault. Faulty calibration, she whispered to the empty room, trying to rationalize the impossible. She triggered the Global Match software, a powerful tool that scans the planet's database for identical thermal and chemical signatures, usually used to track industrial pollution. The expectation was that the system would return 0 matches or point to some known nuclear power plant. The server processors hummed low. In 3 seconds, the answer came. A black pop-up window with yellow lettering took over the center of Elena's vision. 100% spectral match detected, latency 0.0 MEMS. The software spun the virtual globe violently, leaving the Iraqi desert and diving into the blinding white of Antarctica. Coordinates: 71 digs, 11 degrees, Queen Maud Land. The real-time satellite image of that location, captured by a polar probe, showed a physical impossibility. In the middle of an ice cap stable for millions of years, a perfect circular crater 50 meters in diameter had opened up. The water inside it was boiling, bubbling violently, but the surrounding ice was intact, laser-cut. The logical flaw was terrifying. The gas emission in the Euphrates and the melting in Antarctica began at the same second. There was no seismic wave traveling through the Earth's crust. The connection was instantaneous. It was a switch. Eleanor felt her stomach turn. The machine in the desert wasn't a reactor, it was a transmitter, and Antarctica was the receiver. The Earth wasn't just a planet, it was a circuit, and someone had just closed the connection. Eleanor's instinct screamed danger, but her scientific training demanded corroboration. She tried to save the raw images, to the secure local server, creating forensic proof of the event. She clicked Export Priority Data Package. The green progress bar advanced rapidly to 99% and froze. The mouse cursor turned into a waiting hourglass. Seconds later, the screen flickered, and a system message Elena had never seen in her 40-year career appeared in dark red. Error 6666, Curia block sub sigillo pontificio. With trembling hands, she picked up the encrypted desk phone and called the technical emergency line in Geneva. The supervisor on duty, a man named Henri, answered on the first ring. Before Elena could describe the xenon anomaly, Henri cut her off. His voice was too calm, mechanical. Dr. Corves, the automated system reported a specular solar reflection error at your station. It is a common fault at low angles. We are already rebooting your terminal remotely. Elena almost screamed. It's not a reflection, Henri. It's Xenon 135 coming out of the Euphrates and a thermal crater in Antarctica. The system says they are connected. There was a frozen pause on the line. Henry's tone shifted, losing any trace of professional camaraderie. Dr. Corves, look at your screen now. Eleanor looked. Where the image of the Antarctic crater had been, there was now a solid black rectangle digitally inserted over the map. There is nothing in Antarctica, Elena, and the agricultural contract does not cover archaeological curiosities. Go home, now. The line went dead. Elena realized she wasn't talking to a colleague. She was talking to a jailer. Elena did not obey. The denial of reality offended her more than the implied threat. She knew visual access was blocked, but the metadata, the trail left by the data transmission, was often overlooked by sensors. She opened the command terminal in text mode, a black screen invisible to the graphical interface they controlled, and tracked the path those terabytes of information took before vanishing. What she found made the blood run cold in her veins. The system hadn't tried to send the data to the European Union server. A hidden script named Vigilia Petri, Peter's Vigil, was running silently in the system background. The exact moment the temperature in the Euphrates changed, this script hijacked the connection. Elena followed the digital cable. The signal didn't go to Washington, nor to Moscow or Beijing. The data route ignored all public internet nodes and traveled via a dedicated line to a server physically located inside a walled micronation in Europe. The digital signature of the server owner didn't belong to a government or a corporation, but to the Holy See Secretariat of State. But the worst part was in the content of the automatic message the device in the Euphrates sent to Rome. It wasn't numbers. It was a text string encoded in archaic Latin, which the terminal translated automatically, "Seal 4 broken, river dried, kings of the East free." Here is where the story gets strange. Pay attention to this detail. The Vatican server didn't sound an alarm. It responded in 0.02 seconds with a pre-programmed command. Confirmed. Release Energy Base 211. The Pope didn't receive a disaster warning. He received a task completion notification. They had been waiting for the river to dry up for centuries. The reality of Elena's physical situation deteriorated rapidly. The lights of the Blue Room, which were never turned off, abruptly died, plunging her into total darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the text terminal. The silence was replaced by the heavy mechanical sound of magnetic locks on the armored glass doors engaging. Click, clack. She was locked in. On the monitor before her, control was ripped from her hands. The mouse cursor began to move on its own, with the rapid, precise movements of an artificial intelligence or an experienced remote operator. Eleanor watched, helpless, as terminal windows opened and closed. The intruder was executing a military-grade wipe command. The room's hard drives began formatting one by one. The ventilation system stopped, and the air in the room began to grow stale and warm. Then, the desk phone, which should have been mute, activated its speakerphone on its own. A synthetic voice, devoid of human intonation, echoed in the dark room. "Dr. Corvus, your session has expired. Please await the sanitary containment team. Do not attempt to leave." Eleanor looked at the control room glass. In the outer corridor, lit by red emergency lights, she saw shadows moving. They weren't building security. They were tactical shapes, moving with the precision of those coming to clean up a problem, not fix a computer. Paralyzing fear gave way to survival instinct. She was no longer an analyst. She was an inconvenient witness to a programmed apocalypse. Elena knew the main door was a trap. She looked at the fiber optic maintenance duct on the floor, a tight, dirty, claustrophobic space. She ripped out the encrypted external hard drive where she kept her personal backups, a protocol violation that was now her only hope, and shoved herself into the duct, crawling over cables and dust, while she heard the room's glass shatter behind her. Hours later, safe in a cheap motel room near the port, alone, using an old laptop disconnected from the internet, Elena analyzed the data fragments she had saved. She wasn't religious, but the data forced her to open an online Bible in a cybercafe. Revelation 9:14. Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. She had always read this as a metaphor, but the computer screen showed pure physics. The structure in the Euphrates was a high-tech containment cell. The river's drought wasn't climatic, it was the release mechanism. The water served as a radiation shield or a weight to keep the lid closed. When the water vanished, the cell opened. And Antarctica. The thermal data suggested that Base 211 wasn't a shelter for humans, but the location of the counterweight. The planetary balance system required that if something hot was released in the north, something cold had to be activated in the south. The Vatican wasn't praying to avoid the end of the world. They were the keepers of the key. The Antarctic seal melted because the scales tipped. What came out of the Euphrates was pure energy, invisible and ancient, and the ice responded. Elena Corvus disappeared from the academic and professional world. The official Finnish police report listed her as missing, probable suicide at sea due to psychotic break. The satellite data from that day was wiped from public servers. The media reported the Antarctic crater as rare underwater volcanic activity, and the site on the Euphrates was quickly transformed into a closed military zone, cemented over by American contractors under the pretext of soil stabilization. But Elena is alive. She lives in an isolated cabin in the far north of Lapland, where the night lasts 6 months and the internet doesn't reach. She spends her days watching the sky, not with satellites, but with her own eyes. She knows the truth. The alert system worked. The Vatican received the signal and gave the OK. The physical seal was broken. The engineering of the end times was successfully triggered, and humanity continues to discuss politics and economics, ignoring that the main timer has already reached 0. The river dried up, the machine woke up, and the ice melted. What comes next doesn't need water to move. Where are you following this dossier from? Comment your city and country below, and a question for you. If the rivers in your region dried up tomorrow, what do you think you would find at the bottom? Subscribe for the next report, while we still have permission to speak.